Hi guys, it's Wednesday the 21st of January 2021 and today in RE we're looking at the story of the Transfiguration. But before we do, I want you to pause the video, jot down on a piece of paper or write into Teams, can you tell me what happened at the baptism of Jesus? So this was your last lesson. I want you to try and remember what happened. Where was he baptised? Who baptised him? What were the special events that happened? If you want to post your answer to Teams, that'd be brilliant. Well done Cassidy from last week, who sent me a really great recap answer. Okay, on to today's lesson. So, today we're looking at the Transfiguration, which is a very fancy word. Do we know what it means? At the beginning of Transfiguration, we've got this part of the word, this prefix, trans. And the prefix trans means across, through, or to change. So for example, if we look at the word transform, if we think of Transformers, they change from a car into a robot. If I were to transform my desk into a frog, I've changed it completely. If we look at transatlantic, that's a flight you might take and it means a flight across the Atlantic Ocean. If we look at the word transplant, that's where you take something, for example, an organ transplant. So you take a heart or a organ from somebody and you change it, you move it across to somebody else. And we have transport, which means to move from one place to another. So all of these are about changing place, changing location, or changing state. And transfiguration, what we're going to look at today, means to change completely. It's to change into something more beautiful or special. Examples we have here are a caterpillar that is transfigured into a beautiful butterfly. You might recognise this Disney scene from Cinderella where she's transfigured from these ragged clothes into her beautiful princess ball gown. Jesus was transfigured himself, although not into a beautiful Disney ball gown. We're going to look at some of the accounts today from the Gospels of Matthew, Mark and Luke. The Transfiguration is one of the 5 key events in Jesus' life, one of those 5 milestones that we spoke about yesterday, starting with the baptism, then the Transfiguration, which we're looking at now, then his crucifixion, where he dies on the cross, the resurrection, where he rises again, and his ascension, when he goes up and into heaven. The Transfiguration is mentioned in 3 out of the 4 main Gospels. It's mentioned in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew and Luke, and we're going to look at their accounts today to see how they're different and what they can tell us about Jesus. Your task today is going to be to pull evidence from one of these Gospels to support some of the ideas we have about Jesus today. So here are 2 of the Gospels. You're going to be focusing on the Gospel of Matthew today. I'm going to focus on the Gospel of Luke on the next page. So this is the Gospel of Luke. I'm going to read through it just like you're going to read your Gospel from Matthew. And once I've read it, I'm going to have a go at answering these questions here, seeing what evidence I can find for them. So Jesus with Moses and Elijah, and you might recognise those names. They're the names of prophets, and both of these people died long before Jesus was born. About 8 days after Jesus said these things, he took Peter, James and John and went up on a mountain to pray. While Jesus was praying, his face was changed and his clothes became shining white. Then 2 men were talking with Jesus. The men were Moses and Elijah. So I'm sure the disciples must have been amazed at this point. These 2 prophets, these 2 incredibly important people who have been dead for many years, are suddenly alive and speaking to Jesus on this mountaintop. Jesus has just become shining white like a light himself, which is incredible. They appeared in heavenly glory, talking with Jesus about his death, which would happen in Jerusalem. Peter and the others were asleep, but they woke up and saw the glory of Jesus. They also saw the 2 men who were standing with him. When Moses and Elijah were about to leave, Peter said, "Master, it is good that we are here. We will put 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Peter did not know what he was saying. While Peter was saying these things, a cloud came down all around them. Peter, James and John became very afraid when the cloud covered them. A voice came from the cloud. The voice said, "This is my son. He is the one I have chosen. Obey him." When the voice finished speaking, only Jesus was there. Peter, James and John said nothing. At that time, they told no one what they had seen. So in this gospel, we've got quite a few really interesting things. The first thing I spotted is this part here, a voice again speaking from the clouds, just like in Jesus's baptism, where he said, "This is my son, I am pleased with him." This time he's saying, "This is my son, he is the one I have chosen, obey him." And we know that this is the voice of God speaking down because God is Jesus's Father. These are the statements that I'm going to be looking at today, and I need to find evidence for them from my gospel. One of these statements doesn't have any evidence in my gospel, but you will find evidence in yours, so keep an eye out for that. The first one is that Jesus is the light of the world. That's the name of our unit at the moment, and we keep coming back to this phrase. We say it in church, we say it in prayers, we say it in school. And in this extract, we see some very, very obvious signs that Jesus is a light. If I go down to here, I'm just going to take my highlighter. While Jesus was praying, his face was changed and his clothes became shining white. So Jesus is literally shining. So for my box here, I would copy down exactly, using my quotation marks, my inverted commas, this section of the gospel. His clothes became shining white. In your gospel, it says something slightly different, so be very careful. Jesus is the Son of God is my next statement. So I'm going to go back to my text and see if I can find any evidence that Jesus is the Son of God from this part of the text. And I can see here the voice says, "This is my son," and we know that's God speaking. So I would copy down in my quotation marks, my inverted commas, "This is my son, he is the one I have chosen." Next we should obey Jesus and his teachings. And from the same section of the gospel, I can see, "This is the one I've chosen, obey him." God is telling us to obey Jesus. Again, I would write my quote and I would include an explanation. And finally, some of Jesus's followers knew that he would rise from the dead. Now, there's no evidence for this one in my text. Nothing is mentioned about Jesus coming back from the dead, other than Jesus speaking to Moses and Elijah, who are not the disciples, they're not Jesus's followers. In your text, however, you are going to notice some evidence for that at the very end, so keep your eyes peeled. Have a go at this. It's something a little bit different today, but it's really, really important. It's a really good skill to be able to find evidence for these statements of belief from the Bible. If you're struggling at any point with any of this, make sure you reach out and ask the teachers, and I can come through the text with you. And you can always come back to this video to see the examples again. Good luck.